Fortunately, I've met most of you on the call, but there are a couple new faces, which is always really fun. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amelia Wald, as the Zoom says, and I'm the club's executive director. So we are really, really happy to have Angela here to guide us in this tutorial, and Sarah, who is a UVA fourth year who designed this beautiful rotunda for us. So really, really excited to have this event with all of you. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for joining. Yeah, this is stunning. Angela's kits are adorable, and you can feel like the hand felt homemade touch. And obviously Sarah's design is, you know, perfect for who's. So we are super, super excited. And I'm going to turn the event over to Angela. I'm going to spotlight her video so we can all follow along, but feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions. And, you know, we want to keep this casual and keep folks engaged. So it's all yours, Angela.
Great, thank you. Let's see. I think when it spotlights, there we go. So hi again. My name is Angela Stewart, Homework Party for my embroidery related projects. I just wanted to go over what the kit materials are, because I know a couple people are joining just with the pattern. They have their own materials. So just to get everybody acquainted, you're going to need the Aida cloth, which it's woven in a specific grid so that there's these holes for you to pass your needle through. And then the different colors of embroidery floss, which are all detailed on the third page of the pattern. And then an embroidery hoop, scissors, and I do recommend having a pen or a pencil to make marks on your pattern as you go. So if you need to grab scissors or grab a pencil, feel free to do so. And then we can get started in just a little. So I just want to take a moment, and anybody who has any questions or they need to troubleshoot anything because they're bringing their own materials, feel free to come off mute and just ask.
Between the pen and the pencil, do you have a recommendation, or are they pretty equal in your eyes?
It's all fine. I mean, if you want to reuse this pattern at any point, you might want to use pencils so you could just erase your marks. I like to actually cross out my squares as I go when I'm working on such a large pattern, just so I can, you know, keep track of where I am. But if anybody, I know a lot of people are off camera, but I like to get a temperature check of like who has and who hasn't done embroidery. So do we have anybody who has never done embroidery before and they've never even like threaded a needle before? Natalie, we got one.
Sherry Ramsey.
I've threaded a needle a lot of times, but I've never done cross stitch.
Well, you know what? You're halfway there. If you've threaded a needle, you're like, you've got most of the important parts.
I'm in the same boat as you, Judy. I've done a decent amount of sewing, but never any embroidery.
Me too.
And yes, to iPhone user, this is being recorded. You need to go back and check anything out. So if we have everybody back, we can do the first step, which is putting the fabric in the embroidery hoop. So one helpful step is I take the fabric and I'm going to fold it in half and make a little crease. So you notice that the fabric is pretty stiff. So when you open it back up, you see that little crease. Then I can turn it and fold it again in the other direction. And this is a really easy way of identifying where the center of your fabric is. Next step is putting the fabric in the embroidery hoop. So an embroidery hoop, if you've never used one before, has three parts. You have the outer hoop, which is connected with a screw. And if you loosen that screw, just turn it counterclockwise, you'll notice that you can actually flex this hoop open more and then take the inner hoop out. So to put the fabric in the hoop, you're going to put the inner hoop flat on the table or whatever work surface you have. Take the fabric and place it so that it's, you know, generally centered. And I like to press around the fabric around the fabric in the inner hoop to kind of take the shape. Then I'm going to pull this inner hoop open and just gently squeeze it over the fabric and the hoop. If you have to loosen that screw more, feel free, but don't loosen it so much that the screw comes out of the thread. So I'm just gonna... And once I can pick it up, I'm just going to press the inner hoop more. And I say gently do this because I have had people like just straight up Hulk these hoops, just break them in half during class. So once it's in there, you can then tighten the screw. So now you're going to tighten it by turning it clockwise, and you might need to hold that little nut there. And you'll notice that as you tighten it, the fabric might have like a little wavy part. Just feel free to pull it around the hoop before you tighten the screw again. And the goal here is just to have a nice flat working surface. You don't need to tighten the screw as much as it'll go. You just want to keep the fabric in there nice and flat. All right, so does everybody have hoop, fabric in hoop?
Nope, I need a minute or so more.
Me too.
No worries. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a quick question. So I think that mine is not centered, obviously. Is that okay?
I think that's fine. Basically, the reason you want it centered is so that as you finish your design, you might realize you're like, oh, I was a little bit too high up or a little bit too low or side to side. The last step is actually going to be taking the fabric out of the hoop and washing it before you center it in the hoop to frame it. So if you have it centered, it gives you more room to kind of adjust. But so if you want to like take it out and put it back in, that's very easy.
Oh, thank you.
All right. It's really stiff, so you kind of, it'll actually like loosen up a little bit with time. But for
I do a lot of cross stitching in my post college years, and I didn't use a hoop. I had this big frame thing. Oh.
Was it like a scroll frame?
Yeah, probably. I got it at like a craft show, and you could roll it, and it's fantastic. I just haven't done cross stitch for a while. So.
Yeah, this is a little bit more mobile.
This is, yeah, I was working on.
Nice. All right. So if you're still.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the fabric like when you do needlepoint?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So it is that same stiff stuff that you would do needlepoint.
Yeah. So as Lori mentioned, sometimes you don't have it in a frame like a hoop. Sometimes you have it like kind of stretched out, or, you know, it's so stiff that I sometimes just work with it by holding the fabric.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, a lot of needlepoint. The Aida Cloth has the extra, so you can actually, if you get into fancier stuff, you can do half stitches. A lot of times, needlepoint will just have one thread instead of, like, if you look really closely at this, there's like 4 threads.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's so this is definitely like a medium size. So it's a 14 count, and that means 14 squares per inch. So if you're ever buying buying a pattern or trying to buy fabric and you don't know what the count is, you can just measure out an inch and that'll be the number of squares per inch. So if you take something, you can blow it up by having less squares per inch or shrink it down by having more squares per inch, which is actually a very good tie-in for our next step, which is threading our needle. So we're all going to practice by doing this little black square in the center. So we're going to take our black thread, and I recommend pulling the thread at the bottom of the embroidery skein. When you pull it from the bottom, it usually just easily pulls out, versus if you pull the loose end on the top, it starts just tangling right away. So you should pull about an arm's length. So from your thumb and forefinger to your shoulder. So if you can see my face on camera. And after you cut it, you can hold it up and notice that it's actually what looks like one strand of thread is actually 6 strands of thread all bundled together. So we're just gonna take one single strand at a time. And I'm gonna teach you a method of starting your stitches without using any knots. So I'll show this a couple of times just because it can be a little tricky, but the easiest way to separate your thread is to isolate just one single strand, hold it between your thumb and forefinger of one hand, and then pinch the other 6 strands with your other hand, and then just pull. And you see how it's just neatly gathering in my palm here? There you go. Now I've got one single strand and 5 left over. So as you're stitching, when you run out of thread, you can just go back and get another strand from that pile. So I'm just going to demo that again. So it's take one single strand of thread and then pinch the other 6 and pull. And that's how you can easily separate your thread without any tangles. So the next step is threading your needle. I'm going to pause for a second in case anybody had any questions about getting your single strand of thread. No? Okay. All right, so the way we thread our needle for embroidery is a little different than hand sewing. So you're going to take your single strand of thread and double it over so that the 2 ends meet. And on the other end, you have a loop like that. And I like to, once I fold it in half, I like to hold it by the loop and run my thumb and forefinger along the thread just to release any tension that was in the thread. So now I've got my 2 loose tails here, and that's the part I'm going to put through the eye of the needle. So I'm going to trim the thread so that both strands are the same length. It can be helpful to lick the thread as well because it makes it stick together. And now when I thread my needle, I'm going to hold both strands between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going to bring the eye of the needle to the thread. I'm trying to get it to focus. There we go. So once you get both strands through the eye of the needle, pull it through about 4 inches or 10 centimeters and just let it hang. So this is very different than hand sewing because you're always going to have this loose end of your thread. So when you have it needle, doubled over thread with that loop on the other end. Any questions for threading needles? Anybody really struggling? You can talk it
I think
out.
I need stronger glasses.
I think Warby Parker should use this as part of their test.
And I have Warby Parker and they are failing.
Oh, so actually let's, I will talk about like occupational health and safety for embroidery throughout the class, but this is a really good one to start with. So I'm nearsighted. So if I wasn't talking to you all on my laptop, I would have my glasses off and I would be holding the hoop like under my nose. I'm only holding it like under the camera so you all can see. So feel free to adjust. Like if you're nearsighted, feel free to like maybe taking your glasses off actually helps.
Good
Or
light.
if you adjust the lighting, that can also be really helpful. And another tip is taking something like a notebook or a blanket that's darker and putting it underneath or behind your cross stitch so you can see the holes a little bit better. It can be easier. So I'm going to keep this here so it can show up better on camera. All right, does everybody have a threaded needle? I don't want to leave anybody behind. All right, no, not hearing anything, so I think we can move on. So the first one we're going to practice is just this 3x4 rectangle. We're going to start at the top and then we're going to work our way down. So you notice in this wonderful pattern that was designed by one of your fellow alumni or current students, I think, the pattern has these little arrows that indicate where the center of the pattern is. So that's how I can tell like where to start, you know, horizontal and vertical. And I like to start my patterns in the center because it's easiest for me. All right. So I'm going to keep my pattern close by and I'm always going to want to reference it. So to start, again, find where the center of your hoop is. You can, eyeball it for now. But I am going to bring my needle up from the back. I'm going to talk this out first, and as I show you. So I'm bringing my needle through that hole, and I'm pulling until, see my loose thread again. And if I keep pulling, I'm just going to pull my thread right out because there's no knot. So I'm going to keep pulling until there's about an inch left, and you can see that loop really easily.
So we're going to make the small.
May I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So you said you like to start in the middle.
Mhm.
Look at the pattern. Those stitches are about 3 rows below the middle. Should we be adjusting for that?
Oh, so we're starting. Let me get a ruler.
Oh, you're on that one. I picked the other version.
Oh, okay. So the only difference
Is interestingly the rotunda's down 3 rows. Interesting. Okay. So would we make an adjustment?
Oh, yeah. So if you want to do this, thank you for pointing that out. If you're doing the second pattern, just bring your needle like 3 rows down so that you're all going to start at the top edge of this black door and go down. All right, any other questions, or is everybody clear on where they need to start?
So I have a
All right.
question. We pulled the thread through and we're leaving like the inch on the other side, and now you're going in again. Like, I don't get this.
No, it's okay. So this is the very first step of,
Right.
I'm going to bring my needle through this hole, and then the first stitch that I make is this diagonal hole. So I'm using my
Okay.
needle to count 1 up and 1 to the right. And when I
somehow
pull,
this won't pull the unknotted thread through because you're going back at it. Yeah.
oh, I think you're like 1/2 step ahead of me. So
Yeah.
once you've made your first stitch and it's pulled flat on the front, you can flip your hoop over and then run your needle through this little loop at the bottom. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So it's like a little slip knot.
Okay.
And so when you pull it tight, now your fabric, your thread is attached, and you don't have any little loose threads which could get pulled to the front. So that's just a neat little trick. All right, so I can't see anybody anymore, so I'm going to rely on verbal cues. So if you have a question, just feel free. So does everybody have their first little forward slash of a stitch?
So you just do that.
Yes.
I'm getting there. Sorry, I was multitasking. My daughter's basketball game just ended. They won. It was a thriller. I was watching on the other screen.
No worries. Congratulations.
Thank you. They're kind of the bad news bears, so it's a big.
So,
Right.
Angela,
Yeah.
when you started, were you starting at the top of the 4 squares that are going down, or at the bottom?
Yes. We're starting at the top. We're going to
Okay.
go from left to right,
Okay.
back to left, and then down. If everybody has their first little stitch with the slip knot at the back, you're just going to do that same stitch 1 to the right. So I'm bringing my needle through the hole right next to it. And then again, I'm doing another one of these little diagonal stitches. So this is a little different than how I was taught. Like when I grew up, I did all of the X's in a row, but I find that this method of working with the first half of your stitch. So I've done 1, 2, and 3, which correlates to my 3 squares here. And once I get to the end of this row, I'm going to go back.
Oh shit! Ooh. Wait, what? Wait. Somehow I pulled my thread out by accident on that second one. Okay, sorry for the swearing.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I'm
Pull
so
off
busy.
your needle, yeah.
Yeah.
You'll do that.
Does that
probably
happen?
20 times, yeah, that'll happen. You get enthusiastic, you're like, oh.
We're just going to keep rolling.
So that was okay. So 3 diagonal, and then you start going backwards. Got
Yes.
it.
So you're always going to work going from left to right, then back to left, and then to do the next 3 rows down, you're going to keep that same order of going from bottom left to top right.
So I'm sorry. Are you when you're coming back? Are you jamming a second thread in a hole that already has a hole, a thread going through it? Right? Is that right?
Absolutely. So that's a really good thing to emphasize, that you're only going to bring your needle into these holes. If you're pressing, like if you're trying to bring it up and there's a ton of resistance, it probably means you're in the fabric, not in the hole. So just like anything in life, like if it's really, really hard and you're just really pushing through it, maybe you need to adjust. So that's my little Bob Ross moment.
So for the second row, you're dropping, you've gone
Yeah, that's, I'm having,
upper left.
Mhm.
And then you're dropping down really 2 stitches to
Yes.
that
So you're
next-
jumping
2 holes rather to pick up that next one.
absolutely. So you're going from here all the way to here. And if it's helpful, here's what the back will look like.
right, that's, okay, yeah, that's, can you see me? I got the first X, like easy peasy, but I don't know where to re-enter on the back for making the second, working my way leftward X. Where do I?
Let me see. I can't see it, but let me see if I can get it
So
back.
can you see that? So that's where I am. Can you see me?
Oh,
That's your
yes.
back.
So I'm on the back and I just don't know where to come through to keep working my way left.
Oh, wait, were you trying to, so it's easier to keep the hoop facing you.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
I got that. Okay.
So let me make one more stitch so that
Okay.
I can, yeah, so from the front, it's going to be really important to keep the hoop facing you, because as you're stitching, as you have more and more thread in these holes, it's going to be harder to tell the difference between the fabric and the thread. So what you're going to have to do is just watch for that needle tip. So if I've done that first stitch, now I want to come in this hole right here.
Okay, I get that. I get
Yeah.
it. That's where I wasn't seeing that. Okay.
And Angela, this is Tish. I will ask if you could go back, and I just finished my first row of X's. I need to see how you went down to the second row, just when you're ready.
Oh, no, excellent timing. So I'm done my second row. So my thread is up here and I want to come all the way down here. So I'm just going to jump down. And you see how many times I'm like stabbing the fabric at the back? So just adjusting until
Okay.
I'm in that specific hole.
Okay.
And now as I do this next little stitch, I've got, it's the same order. You're just bringing your needle into holes that already have thread.
Right. Okay.
All right, and I'm asking the same question. I finished my first row of X's, and now I just got to figure out, you drop down from your original point and just start working your way back up again, right?
Yeah, so if you finished here,
Correct.
and you drop all the way down there, because the reason we want to have our first layer or first part of our row all facing the same direction is so that the texture is the same. So if you've done your little square or your rectangle, so it's 4 squares or 3 squares by 4, you'll want to.
Oh, nope, not there yet.
Sorry.
There. Okay, but I'm getting the hang of this. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's really, it can be very meditative. Once you get the hang of it, it actually goes really quickly. So to neatly tie off your thread at the back, I like to just gently press the fabric up from one side, and then I'm going to run my needle under some of the stitches. So it's not through the fabric, it's just underneath. So I did that once to trap my thread underneath, and I'm going to do that a second time. But this time, before pulling my thread tight, I'm going to run my needle through that little loop and then pull it tight so I have this neat little knot right up against the fabric. And then I can cut the excess thread. Actually, I don't know if I can get any shorter, but all right, so that's the first step done, and then can move on to the gray.
We have a few minutes to catch.
Yeah, I'm not there yet.
Oh, yeah. No, this is, I should also mention, like, this is a self-paced type of marathon. I mean, people finish one of these in a 2-hour class. You're not going to finish this whole thing in a 2-hour class. So I'm going to just keep going for the people who are ready, but I can absolutely repeat any steps. Like when you're ready to switch out colors, I can absolutely repeat them. Or if you want me to show how to do any of the steps again, I'm absolutely happy to.
I'm looking at door completion as major victory.
So you're choosing to go to the gray, which is the steps and the columns. Is that correct?
Yes. So I've got my little skein. Some people have in like full spools of floss. Some people are sharing because Michael's didn't have all of it. And surprisingly, Amazon doesn't have every type of embroidery thread.
What?
So,
Amazon is lacking?
or it was like $8 for a single color. I'm like, this is extortion. I'm absolutely not doing that.
Somehow I'm not surprised if Amazon tries to extort some quarantine hobbies.
Yeah, it's like the Bitcoin.
They're just getting richer and richer.
So again, I'm gonna just talk this through again. I've got my 6 strands of thread. Oh, sorry. So that's a great question. So you'll want to refer to the key. So the chart has the name of the color and the number. So the number, oh no, you're right. Thank you for questioning, because I need to do light gray, not dark gray. So the light gray has 762, and it also has a little symbol. So traditionally, these were always printed in black and white. So you had to have like a little hieroglyphics key of different squares with different symbols to tell which is which. So I'm gonna get the correct gray.
I am impressed. Lori, when you first started cross stitching, did you use the black and white? Because that would be very challenging for me.
I think some of them were printed in color. I actually did a Rotunda probably 20 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
For a friend, but it was bigger. And I think it was, oh, you know, it may have been black and white. My eyesight was better back then.
There's also different.
Find it?
I mean, I got my OttLight here, but I really need this.
We'll find it. Will it not work? Okay. We'll find them.
All right, so I'm gonna start. This is kind of a choose your own adventure. Oh, hello, everybody. It's kind of a choose your own adventure at a certain point. I'm gonna do the columns going up because I like to work like kind of like a puzzle, like against something that's already referenced. So rather than going all the way out here and having to count all these squares, I'm going to start on the bottom left and go up, then across and down. So you're going to have to do a little bit of counting here. So that's why the pencil can be helpful as well. So I'm going to count.
A question. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is there any, there's no, while you already have I just finished my door, and there's no merit in going up and doing that one square on the roof?
No.
Like white? No.
No, because it's carrying your thread from here all the way up here is just gonna, like, you're gonna get it tangled
Okay.
as you stitch these next ones, or like you could, yeah, like
Yeah.
as you stitch in, and you needed to unpick any stitches, it just makes your life hard.
And then I'm sorry, I just like, so now that I'm done the door, I'm on the back, I just pull the thread through a line of stuff and abracadabra, it's done.
Yeah, so you would run it under once to, like, the first time to secure the thread, and then again, but before you pull it tight, I can actually do this really quick.
I'm so sorry, guys.
No, I'd like to see it again. I'm just finishing my door too. I'm slow because I can't see.
Oh boy, so this is all very light gray.
Whoa, that's gonna be brutal.
Well, the columns are white. So it's really, think about it, it's column color.
So just for the, for the showbiz aspect, I'm actually going to switch over to the to the brick, just so it shows up a little bit easier for everybody on camera. But good time to practice switching out my color. So gonna finish here. If I wanted to just end this right now, I would run, just gently pushing the fabric up from the front, running my needle under some of these stitches. So it can be like one or two, or however many you get. So it's once to trap the thread, and then a second time.
Through the same stitches?
It can be the same stitches, or it can be one
Row
like
up.
one close by. So for the second one, I'm gonna run it through that loop and then pull it tight. If
So
you
you're
want,
saying doing that, you don't have to actually physically knot it, that's creating a knot right there?
yeah, it's also helpful to think about, like, this is gonna have a pretty cushy life. Like, it's gonna be framed in a hoop. There's not really gonna have a whole lot of abrasion against it. Nothing's gonna be picking these stitches out. If I was doing this on a couch cushion or a table runner or something, I might add a little overhand knot. So just running my needle around the thread. So that there's like an actual little knot up there, and then cut it. But for most embroidery, just that little knot that I showed you before works out fine.
Right, so you pull it and then you just cut it and you're done? Like you leave it dangling?
Oh, so you want to cut it as close to the fabric as possible, so you don't have any excess.
All right, cool.
And I should also say, because some people, I was taught by my grandmother, and she really, she cared how neat the back of the cross stitch is. I personally do not care. I am happy to, if you would like the back to be super neat, I can talk you through that. But when I'm emphasizing having your thread neat at the back, it's just so that you don't accidentally get it caught as you're stitching, because that just causes more problems down the road.
I'm definitely in favor of the messy back perspective, mostly because I have certainly made a few mistakes, but you can't tell from the front, and that's what counts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there's a life lesson in there somewhere.
Yeah, there are some types of cross stitch that the front and the back have to actually look identical, because it would be on a functional, again, on a table runner or on a curtain or on, a piece of clothing that you would want to be reversible, but we're not doing that. And I don't play with that, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. If we're gonna do the non-sexy white column, how much are we, what's the length that we do? Is it always an arm? Is it always an arm's length?
So you can see my face now. Sometimes if I've got a lot of one color, I'll do arm stretched out to my opposite shoulder as if I'm pulling a bow or pulling an arrow back on a bow and arrow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how long I cut it. Because when you're doubling it up, you know, you'll just get a little bit more thread. But for for the black, we don't really.
All right, so and we're just doing one run for the column, so archer pose and then double up the thread kind of thing. Okay, right?
Yeah. So for the column, at this point, it's kind of like building a puzzle. So if you're doing the columns, you can go up and down with your half stitches. So you do all of your little forward slashes on the way up, and then the other half on the way down. And then you can work your way across and do the same thing and just keep going that way. And at a certain point, you're going to run out of thread. Or if you really, really want to, you could count the number of squares to the left and start on the steps working from left to right. I think you're just more likely to make a mistake counting. So I would start with the columns.
And you wouldn't make the thread longer because you're just going you just would do it till you can't do it anymore and then rethread for the next.
It can fray. It can get the thread can get kind of.
Yeah, if your thread is too long, it can get tangled or more likely to get knotted. And as you're stitching, every time you're putting your needle into the fabric, you're actually pulling, like you're rotating the thread about a quarter of a turn each time. So as you're stitching, you might notice your thread is getting like a little bit of tension or it's getting twisted up. So what you want to do in that scenario is just let your needle like hang from the hoop and run your thumb and forefinger along the thread to just release that tension. It probably hasn't happened to anybody yet for the black door because it's so small. So if you're going to do the red brick, I'm just going to keep up this same pattern.
So did you start the door from the top and go down because the top is the center?
Yeah, it's
okay. So it had nothing to do with the way you know, the needle going into things that didn't have stitches in them or anything like that. Simply because of proximity to the center of the pattern.
You're actually right on both counts. So, and now I get to talk about it because you asked me. So for variation 1, this is the closest piece that's one color in the center, but I always like to work from the top down. So the reason being, you'll see in like, I think 15 seconds. So now I'm working from left to right, back to left, and I have to go up. So what happens, because I'm keeping this same pattern of always going from the bottom left hole up to the top right for the first stitch, and for the second stitch, I'm going from the bottom right to top left. Now I run into a little bit of a problem. So I want my next row to be directly on top, but I also want to keep this same pattern of bottom left to top right. But if I do that and bring my needle in this hole, you might anticipate this. I just undid my last stitch. So rather than undo my stitch, Now I'm going to just bring my needle up from the top right and then go down. So again, I really want my first stitch to have that little forward slash. So it looks the same, and I can just switch back to going bottom left to top right. So if you're going from the, oh, a little twist up there. When you're going from the top down, you never have to worry about that. So that's why I have everybody start there. And it only happens if you're going one square directly above where you just finished.
Are there occasions where you would like go in an opposite direction, kind of like with knitting, where sometimes you want to start on one side and sometimes on the other? Or is it always bottom left to top right?
Ooh, I mean, whichever one you choose from the beginning of your project, you absolutely can make it work. So if you wanted your first stitch to be the other direction, that's totally fine. You would just want to keep that consistent throughout. Because if you switch it up throughout the project, it can actually subtly change the texture, and at a difference or at a distance, it can change the color just because of the direction of where your stitches are. So it's, I mean, it looks like a mistake when you do it not on purpose, but it's actually a really beautiful way of subtly altering the texture. Like if you wanted to do like grass or make something look even more like rustic. But that is why.
Is there anything you can do to keep from accidentally like pulling the needle off of the thread, if that makes sense?
Yes, yeah. So I'm gonna bring my needle. There's two different things. So as I'm pushing the needle through the fabric, you can either push it from the back or pull it from the front. So as I'm pulling from the front, if I just keep pulling, eventually this is going to catch and I'm going to pull my needle off the thread, right? So what you can do is practice switching your grip to hold it at the bottom. And that looks like as I bring the needle out, I just switch down, hold it right there. And then the second one is adjusting how much thread you have doubled over. So if you're and this can also be helpful if you've cut your thread a little longer this time, and if it's, you know, kind of getting in your way, pull this so it's doubled over a bit more. And in that case, if you accidentally, if you pull your needle, it's not going to pull off the thread right away. You can catch it and pull it back, but you just want to be careful, because if you get this end caught, you'll go from stitching with 2 strands of thread to 4 strands, and your squares will all of a sudden start looking real chunky. Which I can't even call that a mistake, because some designs call for it.
Nice.
Ooh, so this is actually a really good example of, because I've been doing the same color for a while, and changing direction, of going from doing these really short little rows, my thread is getting super tangled up. Again, because it's got all that tension from twisting around. So First, I'm going to demo how to troubleshoot a knot like this. It's kind of like if you had a gold chain, you wouldn't just start yanking in every direction until it broke. Just gonna gently, I mean, maybe you could do that.
Actually, just broke a gold bracelet. So,
so because this is like a very intense knot. It's like I dreamed it up for this class. I'm using my needle to actually undo part of it. So I'm just trying to pull at the thread to loosen it. This might be too far gone though, but we'll see.
I have a question. I'm working my way up the column. I'm doing that instead of the red brick. Now, would you go all the way to the top of the rotunda with it? Well, right? Because you see that one line.
So you could go all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
If you do, I would like just physically make a mark on your pattern just so that you know that when you're going to do these other rows, that square is accounted for.
But I thought I was coming right back down. I thought I'm going diagonally up the column and then I would just come right back down. You get what am I not doing that?
Maybe I said the wrong thing because it's the column. If you go up to the column and then back down, that would be you stop right there. But this is all the same color. So I thought you asked like, do you want to go all the way?
Yeah. But, and again, yes on that. And yes, so I'm taking the column up, I'm going diagonal up. And then I was just going to come instead of stopping there, I was going to go all the way to the top of the rotunda and then come back down.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Okay. So the only thing is you might run out of thread, but I don't think so. But yeah, just make sure to like double count, like count here and then
totally. I'm a good counter. I got that. I'm gonna count the right amount. But so yeah, you can just do that and come back down since it's all one line.
Oh yeah, no, it's everybody's gonna have like if we took after 2 hours, everybody would have different amounts done and in different orders. Like this should be like a personality test.
Okay. Kind of like how I shovel the driveway, right? Same thing. Or eat corn on the cob.
Whenever I think about this order of going from left to right and back to left, I always think of eating corn on the cob. So thank you for mentioning that.
Great minds, great minds.
Anybody excited to see the ground? I saw dirt for the first time in a month.
I feel similarly. I was very excited for the sunshine that finally came out.
2 days in a row.
And things melted.
Yes.
So I'm working with the lighter gray because I'm starting with the columns. I accidentally pulling the thread out and having to lick it, and every time I dye it with my lipstick on accident.
Oh, so I would recommend if you do that, just cut off the part that's like a little dye, just because it's gonna stain the fabric if you pull it through.
Okay, I will do that.
Yeah, that is a hazard of embroidery.
Is this the base fabric that we're working with? Is this cloth, or it almost feels like a plastic? Like, do you know what the actual material is?
So it's cotton. It's actually just got a stiffener. So that's why, yeah. And this will actually loosen up. Like after you wash it, it will still be like a pretty robust woven fabric, but it definitely loosens up over time.
You actually want it stiffer.
Yeah, if this was like cotton, you see how I push this and the whole thing moves, you would have to really you'd have to work to keep it flat in the hoop. But because it's stiff, you can just kind of sew right away.
What's the count on this again?
14. And it's very important for you to check that before you do a project. I've got an example for that. This is my little blue shark that it was supposed to be 4 inches, but because I used some random vintage cloth and I didn't think to measure it beforehand, the whole thing just got shrunk right down. So you can see the difference. That you can use the exact same techniques, but if you use a different cloth, the stitches look totally different.
Got it.
And you'll use a different amount of floss, thread, depending on the count too.
Yeah, completely. So if I think I still used 2 strands here, but it's just super densely packed. If you're using a bigger weave, you might use 3 strands instead of 2. And like for the world of needlepoint, this is just one type. There's other designs where you'll use a thicker, I'm trying to talk and undo a knot at the same time. Here we go. So there's other types of embroidery where you'll only do diagonal stitches, but you use a really thick wool yarn. So if you've ever seen like a needle pointed belt, that's usually the type. But it's still the same idea. You have a grid and you're using a needle and thread to create a design.
Anyone else feel like they finally found their groove? Like I feel like I finally get it now. I'm in a rhythm.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah, going coast to coast on the column to the top of the rotunda, definitely.
It's a confidence builder for sure.
Exactly.
I miss Charlottesville.
Me
Haven't visited in a while. Although I've got a nephew, got accepted, very excited.
Congrats.
My family is split with tech people, so he was my last hope for a UVA nephew or niece.
I'm glad he had the good sense to make the right choice.
Yes, us too. His brother's at Tech, and his parents went to Tech, so.
Oh, well.
I do feel badly though for the kids, going off when there's
COVID.
getting the experience.
So Angela, are you counting how many times you're going up? I saw you marking on the paper.
Yeah. So I like to shut my brain off during embroidery. That's like the best part of it. So I do everything I can to support that. So every once in a while, I will like double check my count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now I've got 2 more. I find that that's more reliable than trying to keep it in my head of like, oh, I have to do 9 rows up, and then I'm just constantly recounting. So I just like to scratch them at my own.
I have a question. I'm at the turnaround point at the top of the rotunda, so I'm on the upper right corner of a square. Where do I come out? Do I bring it down at the lower right? Or just refresh my memory on making the turn, coming back around?
So if anyone works with Excel all day like I do, I've been teaching you to go across on rows. If you're doing the column, you're going up and then down. So whichever way you want to go is fine, as long as your next stitch that's on top, let me just make a random one out here. So your entire column, it's got little forward slashes.
Yeah, yeah.
As long as your next one finishes the X, you could go top left down, or you go from the bottom up. So it doesn't matter which one. I think going across so that it's top left down to bottom right is a bit more efficient, because you're just going to have a bunch of horizontal lines at the back.
Okay.
So that's what, so if you're doing rows, you've got all these little vertical lines. When you do it that way, you'll have horizontal lines at the back.
Okay.
But again, I mean, the back doesn't really matter, but it is helpful if you're trying to figure out where you've gone.
Okay.
So my thread has been getting super tangled. So again, I've just, in this case, because I had to undo that stitch, took my needle off the thread, and then I'm running my thumb and forefinger. I'm actually using my nail to help untwist it.
Do you find that the longer the thread, the more tangles you deal with?
Yeah, this is what I'm doing right here, is like the worst case scenario of, I've got, if this ever focuses, I've got a long piece of thread and I've got short little rows. So that's really exacerbating it. But again, I did promise more occupational health and safety tips. So I don't know if any of you have dealt with carpal tunnel or tendonitis, but that's what I got from college. So embroidery was actually really helpful to, like, in my recovery, but I had to learn different tips. Oh yeah, what's up?
Interesting that that wouldn't bother you, because I do know my sister's tendonitis impacted her ability to knit.
Yeah, so it totally depends on where the injury was. So I know Tish is left-handed. I don't know if anybody else is, but I would do that little claw. So like my whole hand was wrapped around so I wouldn't sponge my writing. So that's how I got tendonitis. But for embroidery, it's a totally different set of movements. So if I keep my thread longer, I'm just going to hold it away from the camera so you can see, I can make these really big movements from my elbow.
1, 2.
But if I leave my thread really short, I have to make these really tiny little movements from my wrist. And that's just, I mean, even if you don't have tendonitis, that's just more likely to cause inflammation or damage. So as tempting as it is to save all the thread and stitch down to the last little bit, it's better to just leave your thread a little bit longer and just switch out earlier.
2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2,
I have to say, I think that arm length thing depends on your height, because I think it's shorter and I have to change mine out because.
Yeah, for sure. It really depends on the pattern as well, right? So for the first little bit, we've got this tiny little black door. Didn't want to, waste too much thread there. But if you've got, a lot of one color, you can absolutely cut a little more. But you're also right, it is very dependent on the person.
I'm short.
That's the nice thing about embroidery, though. It's 100%, unique to you.
Yeah, but I can't recut that Where did it go? Oops.
I can relate to the short arms. I'm only 5'3", so similar.
How did I lose my thread?
Makes a difference. I'm 5'8" and my arms are just really long. Like my sister used to say I had go-go gadget arms. So, like, I feel like I do get a lot of length.
Don't ask me how. Well, I'm gonna have to recut it anyway because I lost it.
I really thought that if I was doing crafting that the whole height advantage thing that haunted me in sports wouldn't keep haunting me, but alas. Even in embroidery, it pays to be tall.
This is good feedback because I am 5'10", so I've always been telling people that the arms are, yep. All right. So if you're ready to switch out your next color, again, I'm just going to demo this of pushing the fabric up from one side and running your needle under some of the thread at the back.
So you finish the section and you finish it off. You don't jump over to another section, even though it's only one stitch over.
I feel like you're my Vanna White for this class. This is so helpful. No, it's perfect.
If I'm so lazy, I would jump over one stitch into the next section.
So I just wanted to demo it in case anybody was like running out of thread. But for me, because I just finished this section, I would probably just jump over here and then start working my way down. So you would just leave this column empty. You just have to make sure to leave that square. So that would look like I'm up here. I'm leaving. Let's get this something black behind it to show. There we go. Gonna leave this square empty, and then this one's gonna be full of stitches and that one. So I'm just gonna mark this just for reference.
What did you mark that with?
Oh yeah, so I mean, this is not sponsored, but if it was, if I ever had a sponsor, it would be this company. This is a water soluble marker. So it goes on, it's amazing for embroidery because it goes on blue, and my water bottle here, it just immediately disappears with water.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, right? So it's really helpful for little marks like this, or if you're transferring on a pattern. So because, I mean, we're literally working with columns, so it might make sense to, instead of doing 2 rows, like working back and forth all the way down, to just go down and back up and just do columns instead. So feel free. I mean, you've got lots of space to practice. And some people, have a preference. So you might find it easier to work across in rows. And, sometimes I would actually work across the whole thing. So I would start at the bottom left here and do every red square, just leaving space for the columns.
Wow. So instead of sticking with the vertical column concept,
just work kind of like an old inkjet printer.
Do you have to do it that way? What if you like the column?
Oh, no. So you would leave space for the column. So you would do all of the red and just leave space for the columns. So you would skip these squares and leave them empty, so you could go back and fill them in.
All right, so I just finished my first column, and so when I tuck it under the stuff in the back, it doesn't, it can be tucked behind the gray column, or could I tuck it behind the black door again? Like, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, it does not matter. I like to, so if you're, so say you're like down here, I would try to get it somewhere up here because it's never going to touch another piece of thread. Versus if you do it right at the bottom here,
Right.
you're going to add more stitches over here, and sometimes it can accidentally get pulled out.
Okay.
That's it.
Good to know. And you like to tuck it twice, just right?
Yeah. So the first, let me do this at the back. So it is first one. So number one is getting it under the thread so that it's nicely tucked away.
Mhm.
And then the second one is to make this neat little knot where I'm pushing it under. And this time, before I pull my thread tight, I'm going to run it through that little loop and then pull it tight.
Wow. Okay.
You really just want to like keep it out of the way. So again, embroidery goes surprisingly quick. So we've only got, I mean, we're coming up on the last half hour. So rather than me just doing little rectangles, I wanted to kind of invite you to ask any questions about any part of the design. I'm also going to go over how to outline part of the design. If you go on page 2 or page 3?
3.
Yeah, thank you. So page 3, it mentions, you know, working all cross stitches with 2 strands of thread, working all back stitching with 1 strand of thread. So it's a little easier to see on the really blown up patterns. And also feel free, like if you're, I'm just working from the one pattern with the whole thing, feel free to use the even bigger version as you're stitching. You'll notice that some of these stitches have these outlines. So for the Rotunda is outlined with that darker gray 414.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And the option, the variation 2, where is it? There we go. This is even more noticeable. So you've got the lettering just with these thin stitches. So that's, all right, let me zoom in. So the N in New York, if it's the length of 4 stitches with this very thin line, that would just be using 1 strand of thread, and I can demo what that would look like.
Oh, okay.
That one
You
has more.
may I ask
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
pattern question?
Oh yeah, of course.
I was going to ask
So-
you about the new. Sorry.
When you're looking at the dogwoods,
Yes.
are like little stray brown, you know, like the branches where there's a little bit of brown. Is it okay to hop a few stitches on those?
Oh yeah. So for so say like this section where you've got a lot of brown here and then you've got a couple left here. If you
Yeah.
wanted, you could do all of the brown first or do like just one section. So you do all of this and then do the pink parts of the flower. And because it's actually 2 different colors of pink, you would be switching them out. So yeah, it's definitely whatever is easiest for you to keep track of. I just like to work, just like if you're building like on a physical pattern, I would do this section and then I would do all of the light pink that is touching the brown, and I would just build it off of there. So that before I move on to these next sections, just because you have to keep counting, and it's just super easy to accidentally get like one stitch over.
And then
Right. Can I ask a question?
a single stitch, do you run under to start with as well? Because you're not going to have like that one little black square up there in the rotunda roof or whatever that is.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to, well, actually you would do the loop and then you'd run it under, I guess.
Yeah. And also I would do all of this gray first and just leave space for this and then do it at the very end.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I just finished, my one column on the front, and then I don't know what happened. What did I do that this is, I already cut it. What was that? What happened there? It's like,
That's your door. That's your door.
no. This gray from my column on the back side. What did I do? Why is there, I have no idea.
Can you pull it out from the back? It looks like your needle got doubled up.
I can't pull it out. It's just strong there. I guess, did I miss like a loop or something? So what do? I just let it hang out there?
Is it? Oh, it is on the back. I would just tie a little overhand knot so that it doesn't pull out, and then just cut it. That's it.
Okay.
I accidentally did the same thing and I didn't notice. I just kept stitching and now there's like a random piece.
Right. What do we do? That was weird.
Okay, so with Aziza, also hi Aziza, I can see what happened with yours, where there was like a little knot in your thread. So when you pulled it, there was this extra loop. And then when you like kept stitching, now it's just hanging out.
Because we didn't look at the back. Like, should you frequently check the back so you don't do that? Because
it's like a balance. Like you don't want to be paranoid, but it can be helpful every once in a while. Also, you will get used to like how far you pull it out, so you'll notice if it stops short.
Okay.
So the question that I have is, are you going left to right because you're left-handed? If as right-handed, should we be doing right to left?
I feel like a ghost of some ancestor is going to correct me no matter what I say. There's definitely a way, like, yeah, some people would just pick a different direction. I always like left to right, again, because we're in the Western world and people read from left to right. It can be really helpful. But in other areas, it would make more sense to start at the right and go down. It also totally depends on your pattern. If you've got like a really complex pattern and it's easier for you to pick like, again, columns rather than rows. And if you find it's easier as a right-handed person to do a different direction, just feel there's only so many ways you can fill in the space.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I really like the idea that I have like left-handed supremacy though, in this one tiny area, which is not a thing.
Angela, do you have, or Sarah, I guess either one, do you have a rough estimate on how long you think it might take us to finish this project?
Ooh.
Yikes.
A long time.
So I think the best way to estimate is, time yourself for like, I mean, maybe don't time yourself, it's supposed to be recreational. But but like for a half hour, because you're definitely improving faster. So don't look at what you did in 2 hours, because you were learning for this whole time, but you were like setting it up and just learning the stitches to start. But I would say probably 10 hours. Sarah, is that?
That sounds like one season of a TV series to me, and I feel like
Yeah.
I'm much better about myself if I finished a cross stitch while watching TV instead of just sitting there. So,
Yeah.
anybody got a good TV series they've watched? I've made my way through The Crown so far. I finished Bridgerton. What should be our next?
Ted Lasso.
Oh, I've heard that's really good.
Funny.
Yeah, you will listen if you get really into embroidery. You will now listen to your TV. So podcasts are really good. Yeah, it's just someone I was teaching a class earlier this week, and they said they needed something so that they wouldn't be doom scrolling.
Yeah,
They just wanted something with their hands.
Yeah. That's probably a good, I should have had this long time ago.
It's really surprising, but I do recommend filming yourself. Like if you want like just a 20-minute self-guided meditation, just literally taking your phone out of commission by filming your stitching. It's great. It's like the one period of time where no one will expect you to respond and your hands will be busy. It's great.
I like that strategy.
Like embroidery porn?
I think there's definitely an Instagram niche for embroidery.
I love the embroidery where they say like really crazy, like inappropriate things, but it's these cute little pictures of like families and flowers and dogs. So you don't really expect it.
Yeah, I eat that stuff up. It's amazing. So just in case you're on Team Brick and you're leaving the columns for after, this is what it looks like if you're just leaving space.
Is it weird to be team alternate brick column? Is that weird?
No, not at all. Especially if you're running out of thread, like, oh, I finished this entire red section and you're out of thread, might as well switch to the next column.
Might be more interesting. Keep changing it.
Yeah.
They've got to invent an easier way to thread needles. What the heck?
So, well, you can't do it with this one. When I use things with bigger eyes, my mom always taught me to make a sandwich with a piece of paper.
Ooh.
What?
I do. But this has a really small eye, so I don't have a solution for that.
Oh, is the dark gray only for outlining shapes, not for actually like stitching?
Yeah. I think it's only for outlining the rotunda.
Okay.
Which would be, yeah, I think it's just for outlining and also defining the steps, because you've got, yeah, so you could do like longer lines.
Thank you.
No problem. Oh, this is a better image. There you go. So like the steps and the, I've never been to UVA. I'm probably in the minority on this call. But I see it's got the, whatever the triangle thing. There's a name for it. And then the Pantheon style.
Rotunda.
Rotunda, right.
I don't know if anyone has gathered yet, but the black square at the top is the clock of the rotunda.
Yep.
Yes.
That was.
Whew. Just threaded. That was tough.
That's an achievement in and of itself.
There you go.
So I've never been in the Rotunda. I went to the law school, so I didn't spend a ton of time on main campus, but like, what's inside of it? Because I know like the Pantheon in Rome is just empty and there's just like a hole in the middle. Like,
Oh my goodness, it was the original library of the original academical village. So there's books and rooms and study nooks and all that kind of stuff. So you must go there next time. It's
And it was based on what you saw in Rome, so.
It was totally
ironically enough.
renovated a few years back. It's gorgeous inside.
It's gorgeous. Yes.
Nice.
And when you're in the like lowest level, you can see where it initially had like the chemistry ovens and stuff like that, because they've done excavations. And yeah, it's a beautiful building. And of course you get to do the Whisper Gallery in the dome. So.
Cool.
All right, I'm starting red. You start from the back and you go forward, right? I'm just new
Oh,
at
yeah.
this. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
You knew what to do, but I am here to support.
There we go.
I'm your embroidery coach. I'm here for emotional support.
All right, there we go.
All right, so there is a special needle then. Is that, I'm looking at supplies needed.
Ooh, let's see. What does it say?
Embroidery or tapestry needle.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
just a basic sewing needle. I don't use anything special when I do it. That's what they're called apparently when I looked it up. I was trying to get across that they aren't like for your sewing machine sewing needles.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I can also do like a little show and tell because I've got all my little bits and bobs here. This is a standard sewing needle. See how, yeah, you see how thin that eye is?
Mhm.
And you'll notice that, I mean, it's very sharp. So it's the same width from the eye all the way down versus tapestry or counted cross stitch, which is what we're doing. This is like a very exaggerated one. So this would be, if I can get it open. You wouldn't use this style for this size. So you have to be careful about what you order because this would just make, I think, a giant hole.
Okay.
Like that. But the eye is wider, so you can fit multiple strands. And then standard embroidery needles. Are a little thinner and they're just like more multi-purpose, but they still have that bigger eye.
Mhm.
But if all you have is like grandma's sewing stuff in the cookie jar, because I think everybody had that at some point, you could still do cross stitch with a sewing needle. You would just have to like really struggle to get your needle threaded.
More than I'm already struggling? Jeez.
Yeah, there's no need to make life harder.
I'm surprised they haven't come up with like a tool to do it.
Ooh.
There's gotta be.
So there is.
There we go.
So let me, I feel like I'm on the Truman Show. Like these questions are just too, like I planted y'all. So let me get some more thread and I will demo if you ever want to use a needle threader. They can be a helpful tool.
That was weird.
No.
right, so I'm gonna have to clear out the background or else this won't pick up. All right, so a needle threader there's different styles, but this is the most common. So I've got this plastic part and I've got this curved wire. So you see how it's kind of in the shape of a diamond?
Mhm.
I'm gonna put both wires through the eye of the needle. And now it's basically, this is my new eye where I'm going to bring the thread through. So that was much easier to thread.
Yes.
Now I'm going to pull the wire and the thread through the eye of the needle. And I've broken, this is the first one that's lasted me more than like 2 weeks, because you have to grab the wire and the plastic part at the same time. If you just hold the end, it's going to pull the wires out. Took me a while to figure that out. So I'm going to grab the wire, and I like to use my thumb kind of as a lever, or as a fulcrum of a lever. And there we go. Pulled the thread one side to the other, and then I can just pull the thread out of the needle threader. And there you go. So it's helpful if you're using less thread and you've got a larger eye. If you're using more than 2 strands, the needle threader just like shreds your thread. So it's not helpful in every scenario.
Angela, our kit had a little bit of felt with it.
Oh yeah. So this is the last part. So this is, it's kind of like a cooking show. So say you're done your design.
It's Food Network magic.
Yes. So say, your rotunda has magically transformed into a coffee mug. When you're done all of your stitching, what you're going to want to do is take the design out of the hoop and hand wash it with cold water and soap. So it doesn't matter what kind of soap, it's just like regular Palmolive or Dawn, or I've used shampoo in a pinch, just anything clear that doesn't have any lotion. Because as you've been stitching, the oils from your hands have been depositing onto the fabric, which over time can actually yellow the fabric. And because, you're going to want to pass this through the generations and show what you did during COVID, you want to preserve it as much as possible. So hand washing it and then just let it dry. Because the fabric is so stiff, you don't really need to iron it, because when you put it back in the hoop, you will just like tighten it, make sure it's flat, and then tighten the screw as much as you can. And then you see here, you're going to trim the excess fabric around the hoop to make the largest circle you can. So there's 2 different ways of framing your patterns. So to frame it in the hoop, you could just cut it and then take a needle and thread and gather it at the back, and I'll demo that. But you could also take a piece of felt and cover it up after you do that. If you want to do that, I recommend tracing the inner hoop before you put it in. The number of times that I've like already put it in and being like, wait, I missed a step. So again, just make life easier on yourself.
You trace the outside of the inner hoop.
Yeah. So then I'll have this. That's the right size to cover up the back of my hoop. And if you have a glue, like again, it's just the back of the hoop. It's not the star of the show. So if you want to put it back, put your design back in, and if you just want to cover up the back with the felt and just, glue gun it, that's totally fine. There's absolutely no judgment. But if you don't have a glue gun, these would be the steps. Let me.
Oh, yeah, I do.
All right, so I'm gonna take some thread, and this time I'm not gonna have the little slip knot. I'm just gonna make a knot on one end. Try and double
Are you
knot it.
double knotting it? Is that what you're
Oh
doing?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's because as I'm bringing it through, if I get it through one of the holes and it's not double knotted, it's just gonna come right out.
Okay.
So I like to start right up at the screw, and I'm gonna make sure my needle is at least 1/4 of an inch, maybe even 1/2 an inch away from the edge. And my stitches are like 1/2 an inch long. So if you've ever hemmed a pair of pants or like hemmed a curtain or anything, you might have used this stitch, which is just a running stitch. So you're just drawing a dashed line all the way around the outside. So I'm just going up and down. Up and down, and that's it. So you're going to go all the way around, and when you get back to the start, you're going to pull the thread and it'll gather. So I'm just going to keep going for a little bit. It's going to take me a minute. So if you have any other questions, feel free.
Yeah. You said to cut off the material?
Yeah, so it's easier to have it neatly gathered at the back if you have, if you turned your square into a circle.
Got it.
Don't cut it too close to you want the fabric extra hanging over. Okay. So it's just the square to a circle. It's not.
Yeah. And, you know, honestly, for embroidery, there are so many different ways of doing this. Like some people, you know, put it in the hoop and then cut it right to the edge and then just glue down felt to cover up everything. I don't like to risk that because if, you know, if it comes out or you need to wash it or something, it's like super unforgiving.
This is a weird question. Could you paint the hoop before you do this?
Oh, absolutely. Some people
want it to be wood. Okay.
Yeah, some people stain it or you can paint it. Absolutely. You can also frame them in a picture frame. They look really cute framed under glass.
Mine's gonna have to be viewed like a Monet, a little further away. Better from afar.
Has character.
Yeah, and I like to think, you know, if this is the first time you've ever done embroidery, this is the worst you've ever been at embroidery. Like, congrats, this is this is the worst. Like sometimes if I go to the Met and I see like the orphans from the 1800s, got these amazing samplers, I'm like, I'm never going to be as good as them. And that's okay.
They spent all day doing that.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, they didn't have a career other than that.
They didn't have a job. Those 12-year-olds, actually, they might have had jobs.
Yeah, they probably went blind at like 30 as well.
All right, on that really cheerful note, when you get all the way back to the beginning, I like to double up about 2 stitches. So this is the very satisfying part of you pull the thread and it just starts gathering all the way. For some reason, it always reminds me of like Raggedy Ann, like her bonnet or something. So I've got these two little ruffles, and I'm going to run my needle right through both of them. And at this point, like, you don't care if you're getting in the holes of the fabric. You're just getting through all of it. All right. So then I think for the 80th time, I'm telling you, run your needle through once and twice and just through a little loop. All right, so now got my little felt circle. And I can do, I mean, you could just leave it hanging like this. Just put a little bit of string by the screw and hang it on a wall. Super cute. Or you could take the felt at the back and glue it around, or take some extra thread I'll just use this. And then use your needle and thread.
A whip.
Yeah, to just stitch it all the way around. So I'm catching the fabric of the embroidery and the felt. Or if you had fabric glue, that's also a good option. Some people do both, like glue the felt or whatever backing fabric you have down, and then they stitch on top of it as well. I think that's overkill though. All right, and you would do that all the way around.
Cool.
All right. But back to my abstract masterpiece. I'm going to show you. So if you're doing the thinner lettering or you're doing the outlining of the rotunda, going to get one strand of thread, and you're not going to double it up. You want these details to be thinner.
There was a really good video, description of this in the list, in the instructions. The back.
Which
may have been the last YouTube video. Yes, I think it is the YouTube video.
Thanks.
This you make a knot?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, got one single strand of thread. So I'm doubling it up so that it's thick enough that won't get stopped by the hole. So I would do the lettering at the very end so that it's easier for you to orient yourself. So if I'm doing this I, I'm going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 down from this 4. 4.
And I know not everyone is based in New York, obviously, so I will pretend not Be offended if you change the words and want to write Wahoo Wah instead of Virginia Club of New York or something like that.
I'm a long distance member.
We love them all. We think anybody who wants to be part of our community can count.
Really never got going. We tried. And I never ended up doing anything with the DC club, so.
Perfect opportunity to start with us then.
Yeah.
I think I've been a member since 97.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness, are you gonna be really upset if I say that I was born in 96? So
I won't be upset, but I might go get another glass of wine. I might have to get another glass of
I
wine.
could be your mother.
Oh, yes, you could. Hey, I joined in 1972.
There you go.
Okay.
that was my grandpa was at my grandpa's very fit. He's a former colonel. And he was at the gym one time wearing an Ohio University shirt. And a guy who was probably my age came up to him and asked him when he graduated. And my grandpa said his graduation year. And this guy goes, "Oh," he said, "my dad wasn't even born yet."
My dad wasn't even born yet. That's great.
My grandpa was thrilled that he was going to the same gym as a 20-something. So
Yes, indeed. He should be.
Yeah.
All right, so for this really thin lettering, we're breaking away from the cross for the cross stitch. So I'm just doing one single strand, just from one hole to the other to make the shape. So if you want your letters to be a little thicker, you could use 2 strands instead of 1. Or if you want it to go faster, you could do longer stitches because you're not as limited. You could do, instead of from one hole to the next, you could go 2. So you have these longer stitches.
What happens when you go to the diagonals where you don't have a, you do the whole, like the V, it goes over 1 and down 4. So you have to pretty much go that full stitch in just run, right? You can't break it into multiples.
So
unless you stitch into the rows of the cloth.
Yes, this is kind of like, you know, where, I don't know if you ever took chemistry where they tell you one thing for a couple of years and at the end they're like, oh, actually that was just, we made that up. So you would understand. So you know how I said like, oh, you have to bring your needle through the holes every single time. If you don't want to make like such a long stitch, you could stitch into the fabric so that you could have 4 smaller stitches in between. Sarah, let me know if you agree, if you have a different method.
I designed it so you could do like a long stretch because it's not like too awfully large, but either way works. Like whatever you prefer is perfect.
Yeah. So if I'm doing this here, just making up my own.
Then you might do a long stitch for the verticals too, right? And just keep because it might be noticeable that they've got the little steps if otherwise, right?
Yeah. So that's, if I'm doing one long stitch here.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good to me. Yeah.
Would you do that one again, please?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going, just gonna do another V. So I'm using my needle to count 1, 2, 3, 4 down and 1 to the right. And then same thing on the reverse.
Amazing.
So how do
Yeah.
you finish those off? Because you don't really have something to run under.
So if you end up closer to the rotunda, you feel free to like sneak up here and run your needle under some of the steps, or just do a little overhand knot. So I do that by holding the thread and just running it through. And you see how as I'm holding the thread here and pulling it, it's making the loop go really close to the fabric. So that's how you can end up with a little knot right up against there, but feel free, like, practice that as much as you need to. All right, so I'd love if you could hold up your hoop. I'd love to see how far everybody went.
Far.
I have columns, you just can't see them.
I'm with Aziza. I promise I've done more than it looks like.
Yeah, I've got a great column in there.
Amazing.
So where can we share them when we're all done?
I was about to ask you all if you wanted to email me your finished projects. We would love to either feature them on our Instagram or put them on our Facebook, or just so I can see and know that y'all completed it and had a lot of fun. So
Are you how long are you willing to wait for those results?
Exactly.
Go at your own pace for sure. Whatever works best for you all. But yeah, would love to see the finished products that everyone made. I think that'd be really fun. And I will share them with Angela as well. So she can be updated on our progress.
Can I ask Angela and Sarah a kind of advanced question?
Yes.
Do you usually railroad your stitches?
I don't even know what that means.
All right, I had heard about this some time ago, and railroading, because you know how sometimes the threads twist? Railroading is actually where you go down between the threads to keep them flat and keep them from twisting when you go down through the
Interesting.
They lay a little bit flat, and I had read up on, I've never done it before, but I had read up on it way back. So I was trying it. It will slow you down. So for those of you who don't want to be slowed down, but supposedly it keeps the threads keeps them parallel to each other instead of potentially twisting. And you only do it on the top. You don't do it when you come back up through.
So interesting. Yeah, so that's when I mentioned like, oh, your thread gets twisted up. So like let it untwist by letting it hang. That's what I prevent. But I didn't know you could actually do something to prevent it at the source. That's so cool.
It's not so much preventing it. It's more of just the way it's going to look on the front of the canvas. So if you look up railroad cross stitch, and it's just that you take instead of just taking the needle directly down, you push it through the two threads and twist them. So like I said, it might not, I mean, I'm sure you get used to the rhythm, but I just didn't know. I wanted to ask someone who might have done it. So Sarah, are you familiar with it?
Not done it before.
All right. Like I said, I'd never done it before either. So
there's always so much to learn. And so one more thing, my name for, I think it's both videos, at homework_party. You don't have to like show me your work, but I just wanted to say that COVID brain is a very real thing. If you ever need, you ever like have any questions about embroidery, like you forget how to start or end or anything, the video is going to be on YouTube, and you can also reach out to me on Instagram. Like my DMs are open for embroidery related questions, so feel free.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Do we all want
I'm inspired by your pattern, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's really beautiful.
And Angela, thank you for your teaching.
This was really, really lovely. Do we maybe all want to hold up our little, now that we're in gallery mode again, hold up our little circles, and I'll try and take a screenshot of us just for
Oh, boy.
Our own little posterity. All
I
right.
didn't get my materials in time.
Judy, I'll forward you your tracking number to make sure that it should be coming. I think the snow.
Well, they said it was already out or whatever, you know, because I didn't register until last week, was it?
Oh, I see. You registered for a view only.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I didn't have, you know, I got the paper.
Yes. All right. Well, your smile is beautiful enough. 1, 2, 3, cheese.
Cheese.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Angela and Sarah. This was really lovely. And I'll send an email to everyone with both of their Instagrams in case you want to follow up. And like Angela mentioned, check out some of her tutorials and some of Sarah's designs. And this was such a lovely way to spend the evening. So thank you to everyone who participated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Wahoo!
Bye.